Welcome back, everyone. This is part 5 of our series on building a production-grade BDD test framework. Today, we're getting into something I'm really passionate about, creating a super clean and reusable REST client.
So let me ask you this. Have you ever looked at a Cucumber step definition file and seen it just jam-packed with raw API calls? You know, the RestAssured.given.when.then stuff, just repeated over and over? It's a tempting shortcut for sure, but trust me, it's a direct path to a maintenance nightmare later on.
In our last explainer, we put together that really slick environment manager to handle all our different configs. Well, today, we're going to put that foundation to fantastic use. It's going to be the engine that powers our brand new REST client.
Look, putting API logic directly into your step files completely goes against the DRY principle. Don't repeat yourself. It makes your code incredibly hard to read, super brittle, and just impossible to reuse anywhere else. It is a classic anti-pattern, and we are going to fix it for good. So what's the fix? We're going to create a dedicated layer of abstraction, which we'll call a client layer. Now, if you have any experience with application development, this will feel very familiar. You can think of it as a service layer, but for our tests. It's where all our API logic will live, all neatly organized and totally separate from our test steps. We're going to start by building our foundation, a base client. This class is going to handle all the common, repetitive setup for every single API request we make, which will guarantee consistency and just get rid of so much boilerplate code.
And here it is, our base client.java. I know it might look pretty simple, but this little file is truly the cornerstone of the clean architecture we're building. Let's break down exactly what it's doing. First things first, we use Spring's @AutoWired annotation to pull in that environment manager we built back in part 4. Then, we create this awesome reusable method called spec. This method uses RestAssured to build a request specification, and it automatically sets the correct base URL from our environment and sets the content type header to JSON for every single call. Okay, now that our foundation is in place, we can start building specialized clients right on top of it. Let's start by creating a user client that's designed specifically to handle the user API endpoints.
This really illustrates that separation of concerns we're after. The base client handles all the generic setup work, right? But the user client can focus purely on the business logic of its specific endpoints, like creating or getting a user.
Now let's take a look at the user client code itself. Just notice how clean and focused this is. There's zero boilerplate in sight. It's nothing but pure endpoint logic.
The real magic here is that little line extends base client. That's the key. This lets our user client inherit that spec method we made, so each function can just call spec to get the pre-configured request and then simply add its own details. No more repeating the base URL or headers ever again.
So we've cleaned up our API calls, which is awesome, but what about the data we're sending? Manually building JSON strings by hand is slow, and believe me, it is so easy to make a typo. We can do way better.
Instead of fumbling around with strings, we're going to use strongly typed Java objects. You might hear these called data transfer objects, or DTOs. This create user request class right here is basically a blueprint for the JSON payload our API expects when it's creating a new user. We're also using a really handy library called Lombok to keep our code super concise. That @data annotation, it generates all our getters and setters for us automatically. And we've also got a custom constructor here that neatly maps a simple name string into the nested map structure that the API actually requires. So how does our Java object magically turn into JSON? Well, when we pass our create user request object into a RestAssured request, a library working behind the scenes called Jackson automatically serializes it. It just converts it into a perfectly formatted JSON string for us. It's like magic. Now, the single biggest benefit of doing things this way is something called compile time safety. This is a game changer. It means your IDE will actually catch typos or data type errors before you even run the test. This prevents an entire class of really frustrating bugs that would otherwise pop up at runtime. Okay, so let's recap. We have built this incredibly clean, reusable, and type-safe client layer. We should be proud, but this has introduced a new, interesting challenge for us.
Think about a typical test flow, right? The when step creates a user and gets a brand new user ID back from the API.
Then, the then step needs that exact same ID to go and verify that the user was actually created correctly. So, how do we pass that piece of information between steps?
Well, in the final part of our setup series, we're going to solve that state management problem by building what I call a context bridge. Once that's in place, we will finally be ready to write our clean, readable, and incredibly powerful Cucumber step definitions. You are definitely not going to want to miss it. For the full code snippets and the complete step-by-step guide, be sure to check the Medium article link in the video description below.